Chapter 6.
For those of you that are just tuning in just a few moments we'll have live coverage of the death of the 8-year-old, Lloyd Bruce, who was found dead early this morning, in a neighbor's house. The cause of the death is considered to be undetermined at this time, however once we have more.
Turn that damn thing off. Mr. Albert shouted from the kitchen. You wanna know so bad about what's going on, put your damn shoes on and walk across the street. Honey. Please relax. You're gonna wake James up. Getting up from the couch, Mrs. Alberts turned the television off. Hun. It's gonna be alright. Putting his freshly poured cup of coffee down on the counter, he grasped the edge of the counter with both hands. Lloyd. Lisa, Lloyd was a good kid. I can't believe that he's dead, John said in a much quieter and softer voice. Walking up behind her husband, she wrapped her arms around his waist. Honey. I don't know what to tell you to make the situation any easier. Yes. He was a great kid. I think that, as friends to the Bruce family and the DeClue family, the best thing that we can do is to be there for them. Since Lloyd was about 4 years old, John had been his t-ball coach. As a coach, John had gotten himself close to each of the children on his team. Outside of work and coaching, John and Lisa had both donated a lot of money to other organizations, including the Cub Scouts, as a way to help area kids. With the Bruce family and the DeClue family living just across the street, John and Lisa basically watched Lloyd, Malachi, Ronnie, and of course their own son, James, grow up. Though Ronnie and James were still extremely young, the Alberts looked forward to seeing them grow up as well. It was now about 10:30 in the morning. As Lisa periodically looked out the window, she saw several police officers, a medical examiner, Dr. Redding, and the DeClue family and Bruce family going in and out of both homes. Then, as she looked closely towards the front porch of the DeClue residence, she saw a stretcher coming out the front door with an officer at each end. On the stretcher was a silhouette of a young body that was covered with a white sheet and buckled down with black straps. Behind them was Mr. and Mrs. Bruce. Mr. Bruce was nearly carrying his wife down the steps as she cried. Then, about 2 minutes later, Karina, carrying Ronnie, and David as he carried Malachi, both came out of the front door as well. As the DeClue family approached the sidewalk on their side of Finley Lane, Lisa could see David and Karina conversing with Mr. and Mrs. Bruce. Seconds later, as David still carried Malachi in his arms, Lisa could see David walking across the street towards her house. Hey John. David and Malachi are coming over here. Lisa announced, breaking a moment of silence. John hadn't seen Lloyd's body being moved and his wife felt that it would be best that he didn't. Good. Please let them in, honey. David responded as he still held onto the kitchen counter. Before David even got to the door, Lisa had opened it. Come on in, David. Lida said. Turning to face David, John noticed that Malachi was asleep in his dad's arms. Dave. If there is anything that Lisa or I can do for you guys or the Bruce family, please let us know. Actually, John, I was wondering if you and Lisa could watch Malachi for us today. As you know. Pausing for a moment, something happened to Lloyd. I found him. It's alright, David. We'll be more than happy to watch him for you today, Lisa said as she lightly hugged her neighbor. Malachi was still in his pajamas and without shoes as Lisa carefully lifts him up out of his father's arms. Then, as Malachi still slept, Lisa carried him into the living room couch. As Lisa remained in the living room, John walked David back to the door. Dave. I'm sorry about what happened. Lloyd was a good kid. John managed as he almost began to cry. You're right. Dave turned to face John. He was a good kid. And Malachi's best friend. David. What happened? I don't know. I found Lloyd in bed with Malachi this morning. He must have come over early this morning. We didn't even know that Lloyd was in our house. Lloyd had a bad cut on his lower arm. But there wasn't any blood though. Also, the cut was covered with band-aids. I don't know what happened, John. I can only tell you that Lloyd is dead. David opened up the door to leave as the last few words came out of his mouth. Well, David. You guys get everything that you need taken care of. Malachi will be waiting for you guys safe and sound here. Thank you, John. I really do appreciate this, David said, then stepped outside. My mother-in-law's on her way to pick up Ronnie for the day. She should be here any minute. Then, just as he finished his sentence, Mrs. Sanchez's Dodge Neon pulled into the drive across the street. I'll pick Malachi up tonight. All right, David. We'll see you later, John said, and then watched as David met Mrs. Sanchez at her car door. What do you mean I can't play with Lloyd anymore, Mom? Malachi and I always play with him. He doesn't cause trouble. Nicole. I know that Lloyd's a good kid. What I'm saying, Nicole, is that something real bad happened to Lloyd early this morning. Did he get into some sort of trouble? I know that he doesn't always follow the rules so well. So, he's just grounded or something, and so I have to wait a few days. Right? Reaching out to hold her 10-year-old daughter, Lorena pulled her tight against herself and continued. Honey. Lloyd died in his sleep this morning. But Mom. Nicole started as a tear ran down her cheek. Lloyd's only 8 years old. He can't die like that. Unfortunately, honey, you and I aren't the ones to make those rules, Lorena said, and then held her daughter tighter as she began to cry. Dr. Redding. Do you have any clue to what may have caused this kid to die as he did? Larry Wallace asked as he was finishing his own paperwork. Chief. Until we have the autopsy done, there is no way that we can correctly determine the cause of death. There is a bad gash on his arm, yet there is no blood on the bed sheets or the kid's pajamas, Mark continued as he shrugged his shoulders at the 20-year veteran of the Craig Police Department. Who's gonna do the autopsy, Mark? Just to speed things up, I'll do it myself. Based off of what I find, I'll report back to you as soon as possible. Shh. Here comes his parents. Looking back around, Larry saw both Mr. and Mrs. Bruce walking towards the foot of the DeCluse driveway. Then, as they stopped walking, Mrs. Sanchez's Dodge Neon was pulling out of the drive. I take it that Karina and Dave are planning to have the rest of the day side by side with the Bruce family without their own kids running around, Larry said as he changed the subject. Yeah. You've got to expect that, though. This had been a rough morning for both families. Dr. Redding continued as he completed his paperwork. Well, Larry, I'll talk to you as soon as I know something. I'm gonna get down to the hospital and get this done. All right, Mark, I'll talk to you later. Larry walked back to his patrol car as he watched the Bruce family walking up the steps to the DeCluse front door with David and Karina. Eight days later, Craig had one of its biggest funerals in its history. It was estimated that just about a quarter of the area's population had shown up. You know, the last time that I saw a funeral like this was back in the mid-80s when that aluminum shed collapsed on that young child in the trailer park, just outside of town. Mrs. Sanchez said to Karina. I don't remember much about it, Mom. I wasn't even 10 years old yet at the time. Then, as Karina reflected back to her memory of that period of time, she continued. I do remember that the kid's older brother was a Cub Scout. I had a crush on him. Yeah, I know. That's all that you would talk about for a long period of time. What was that kid's name? Warren, Wagner, or something like that. Mrs. Sanchez continued. Actually, Mom, I don't remember. I do remember his face though, and the little dimples on both cheeks when he smiled. Then, bringing her mind back to the present, she thought about Lloyd and the impact that his death was gonna have on Malachi. Mom. I hope that Malachi forgets that he was asleep in the bed with Lloyd's body. I don't know what kind of impact that of memory could have on someone. Well, if need be, you could take him to a psychologist, honey. Personally, however, I think that it would be best to talk to Malachi about his feelings. Then, looking down towards the ground as they lowered Lloyd's casket into its cement vault, Karina, to herself, said her last goodbyes to Lloyd. Looking back up towards her mom, she saw a single tear running down her cheek. I love you, Mom. I love you too, honey. Mrs. Sanchez said, then took her daughter's arm up in her own as they both, with David, Ronnie, and Malachi, turned and walked back to their cars. Since Lloyd's death, 8 days prior, Malachi hadn't slept in his own bed. He either slept with his parents, on the couch, or out to rid you with Nicole. Later that same night Karina walked into Malachi's bedroom. As she looked around she began to pick up toys that Lloyd and Malachi had left out on the floor. After putting the toys away into the closet she then pulled the sheets off of the bed then threw them into a pile of other dirty clothes. Among the dirty clothes she had also picked up a towel that had blood stains on it mixed with dirt. Along with this she had also found the wrappers to band-aids that were laying around on the floor. After everything was picked up Karina vacuumed the room and then put clean sheets on the bed. Going a step further, she even washed the window that had children handprints all over it. Soon, the entire bedroom was very clean and had the smell of Windex throughout the room. During this time Dave had left with Malachi to take him to Nicole's house for another night's stay. About the time that Karina was finishing the bedroom her husband walked in the front door. "Hey honey. I'm back," David announced then. As David reached the top of the steps, he found his wife walking out of Malachi's bedroom. "Hey Karina, you look exhausted. Give yourself a break." "I can't." Karina started and then hugged David. "I can't stand this shit anymore David." "Honey." Holding Karina out at arm's length, "What are you talking about? That poor kid. David, why is it that bad things happen to good kids? And then of all places, in our home." Trying to calm down for a moment Karina paused. "I just cleaned Malachi's bedroom." Karina. Holding his wife tight, they both paused and just hugged each other. About 3 weeks later, August 15th, life for the most part was beginning to get back to normal. On this particular day Karina was working as David stayed home with Malachi and Ronnie. "Hey. Malachi." "Yeah Dad?" Malachi took his attention off of the television then turned to face his father. "What would you think about going to Kmart to buy the things that you'll need for school next month?" "Ah. I don't know." Raising his upper lip, exposing the full length of his canines, he immediately showed that he had no interest in the subject. "We could stop by McDonald's on the way." Dave, over the years, had used McDonald's as a wedge issue for many occasions. "All right. Then," jumping to his feet, Malachi quickly turned off the television then disappeared into his bedroom. "That the most excited that I've seen him in almost a month," Dave thought to himself and then got up off of the couch. Heading towards Ronnie's bedroom Malachi came racing back out of his own room with a light coat in his hand. "That's because we're going to McDonald's," Malachi said loudly with a big grin on his face. "What is because we're going to McDonald's Malachi?" David was momentarily stunned as he had to think to himself rather if he had spoken out loud or if his son had now taken up a new hobby in reading other people's minds. Immediately Malachi came up with an excuse for this strange behavior. "What are you talking about Dad?" "I was talking to myself." Then, as his father walked into his brother's room scratching his head, Malachi went down the stairs to the front door. "My God. I almost screwed up," Malachi thought to himself and then slapped himself in the face. "Wake up Malachi. You idiot." He thought again and then, once more, slapped himself. "Malachi," Dave yelled as he looked down the stairs on time to see his son hitting himself. "Don't let me see you do that again. Do you understand me?" "Yes. I'm sorry Daddy." Malachi looked down towards the floor. "I am so stupid. I swear," he thought to himself and then looked up to open the door. What has come over him? He's been acting strange ever since Lloyd died. David thought to himself as he quickly headed down the steps with Ronnie. Stopping, as he stood on the porch with the door open, Malachi turned around to see his father and brother in the doorway. "Dad. Why is everyone blaming everything on Lloyd's death? Oh my God. He is reading my mind." "What are you talking about Malachi?" "I don't know. I screwed up again. It just seems like that I hear everything lately being blamed on him dying. You said it yesterday when you were complaining about Nicole living so far away. I hope this cuss works. I'm sorry Dad." Until now David didn't really realize that he had in fact mentioned Lloyd's death around Malachi a lot. "No Malachi. I'm sorry." Giving his older son a hug, "I should watch my mouth better than what I have been. I'm sorry Malachi." Looking up to his father's face as he still held onto the hug, "It's alright Dad. I'm sorry for being a pain in the butt." Setting Ronnie down, Onto his feet, Dave picked Malachi up off of the ground and hugged him like he hadn't in a long time. Pressing his son's face into the crook of his own neck, Dave whispered, "You're not a pain in the butt, Malachi. Daddy's just selfish at times. I'm sorry." "I love you, Dad," Malachi mumbled as his mouth was muffled by his father's neck. When Malachi spoke, Dave flinched as his son's canines poked the side of his neck. "I love you too, bud. I think that we also need to do something about your teeth." As David put his older son back on his feet, he brushed the side of his neck with his hand. When he looked at his hand, he found a couple streaks of blood. "Dada. You bleeding," Ronnie said in the best English that he could. "Ronnie. That's bleeding," Malachi corrected his little brother. "I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't mean." "I know that you didn't mean it, buddy. Let's get in the car so that we can go to McDonald's." "Okay." As David bent over to pick Ronnie off of the ground, he patted Malachi on the head. "Don't worry about it. Okay." As they walked into the restaurant, Dave held Malachi's hand and then held Ronnie with the other. "What kind of Happy Meal do you want, Malachi?" Looking up to his dad, then grabbing a hold of his hand with the other as well, he made a funny face. "Can I get a regular sandwich, Dad?" Malachi whispered and then let go, with one hand, as he pointed to the pictures of different sandwiches above the counter. "Well, yeah. If you think that you would prefer a regular one instead of a Happy Meal. Which one do you want, bud?" Dave asked and then looked at the lighted sign. "The one with the 4 next to it. The Quarter Pounder," Malachi said and then looked back to his father. "Well, I think that I'll get the same one. Do you want French fries with it, Malachi?" "Yes please, Dad. Can I get a Coke with it too?" "I think so. And then, if you eat all of your food, you can have an ice cream cone too. Does that sound good?" "Yeah. Thank you, Daddy." "You're welcome, Malachi. Ma'am, we'll take 2 number 4s, a cheeseburger Happy Meal, 2 large fries and 2 large Cokes. And, what would you like to drink with that Happy Meal, sir?" The cashier, a girl that couldn't have been any more than 13 years old, was extremely polite and acted as a professional as she did her job. "Another Coke," Dave responded and then looked at Malachi as he realized that his son was staring at the cashier. As the young girl walked away to prepare their meal, Dave bent down as he whispered to his 8-year-old. "What are you staring at?" Turning his head to face his father, Malachi had a grin on his face. "I'm looking at that cute girl, Dad." Malachi must have said it too loud as the girl looked back and stared at Malachi with a smile on her face. "Well, I think that you're cute too," the cashier said, then turned back around to continue her job. Once again looking at Malachi, Dave saw that his cheeks had turned slightly reddish. "Malachi. You're blushing." Right after David and the kids left McDonald's, they went over to Kmart. As they went down the aisles, they picked up different items that ranged from pencils, writing paper, and a 3-ring binder. Then, just before leaving the store, Dave bought new shoes for both Ronnie and Malachi. As Dave, Malachi, and Ronnie walked out into the parking lot, there was another family that had walked past them, heading the opposite direction. Among the members of this family was a young boy that had pointed at Malachi, made a funny face and then said, "Look. That boy looks funny." Malachi had immediately looked down towards the ground with a sad look on his face. "Hey Malachi," David said real loud, "look at that boy over there." As Dave pointed at the rude child, Malachi looked at the kid. "That boy is ugly," Dave said loud enough to make sure that the kid heard him. At this, Malachi smiled at his father. "Dad. Sometimes I wish that I didn't have teeth like these. I wish, sometimes, that I could be just the same as other kids." Without another word, David and the kids got into the car then headed home. As they turned onto Finley Lane, David suddenly got the idea to have Malachi's and Ronnie's canines removed. "How would you like to have the big teeth removed, Malachi? We could go see Dr. Knox right now." "Yeah, Dad. Let's do that, Dad." Turning the car around, Dave headed directly to Dr. Knox's office. "All right, Malachi. Let's do it." About 2 hours later, Ronnie and Malachi both had their canines removed. Just as they arrived back at home, Karina was just being dropped off from work. "Hi guys. Karina started and then noticed that the mouths of both of her sons were filled with gauze pads. You guys are looking like hamsters today. What happened? Then, as Karina looked at her husband for an answer, she noticed the 2 small cuts on his neck. Oh my God. Then, covering her own mouth, what happened to your neck, David? Ah. It was just an accident, you don't have to worry about it, honey. David walked up to his wife and hugged her. As he was hugging her, however, he felt as though he was hugging a board or telephone pole. Letting go of her hug, out to arm's length, he looked at his wife. Karina, relax. It was my fault. I was holding Malachi in my arms earlier when I accidentally pressed his face into the side of my neck as he was trying to speak. Then, as he wrapped his arms around his wife again, he continued. It's not like we have vampires for children, honey, David joked, then felt her flinch as he spoke. All right. Stepping back from her husband, this is why you got their teeth pulled. Actually, Karina, this is just one of the reasons. The kids and I went to Kmart earlier to get some school supplies. On the way out of the store, a young kid started to tease Malachi about his teeth. Damn it, Karina snapped. Why the hell can't people just keep their mouths shut? I don't know. Though kids are the most innocent of all creatures, they have the ability to also be the most evil as well. Dave commented and then took up his wife's arm to head into the house. Well, what do you say we go visiting today? It's been a while since we visited your parents. Yeah. We should get over to see them. Probably stop over at the apartments to see your mom also. Malachi. Dave Holland for his son from the garage. Deciding to spend the weekend cleaning, Dave started in the garage, the messiest area throughout the entire house. Bending over and reaching into the coal pile, in the corner of the garage, Dave picked up a Power Rangers figure. About 10 minutes prior he had picked a figure out from behind the freezer, then, before that, he picked up a couple piles of Power Rangers from the center of the garage floor. Hey David. Karina walked into the garage after she heard her husband yelling for Malachi. Karina, as with David, had also taken the day off of work and chose to take part, with David, cleaning. Malachi is taking a bath. What's up? I just wanted him to come and pick up his toys out of here. He left most of his Power Ranger toys spread throughout the garage. Walking over by the end of the freezer, Karina's eye caught what looked like a blood spill on the cement floor. Then, as she knelt down to take a better look, she almost hit her head on a nail sticking out of the wall. Hey David. Yeah? David took his attention off of the floor, that he was sweeping, then turned to face his wife. It looks like blood dried up here on the floor. Karina was pointing at the stain as she stood back up. That's odd. Earlier I found a Power Rangers toy behind the freezer. Beside the freezer I picked up an old towel that looked like it had blood all dried up on it. It's probably been there for a while. Who knows? Then, as she turned around, she saw Ronnie standing in the doorway to the basement of the house. Hey buddy. I thought that you were taking a bath with your brother. Malachi put bubbles in my mama. And he put bubbles in my mouth. Well, I'm sorry that he did that to you, Ronnie. Come here and I'll make it all better for you. Once again Karina knelt down to assist her 33-month-old son. Walking up to his mom, Karina looked at his eyes. Well, your eye is a little red. Let me see your mouth. Open up wide, Ronnie. Opening his jaws as far as he could, Karina acted as though she was looking for bubbles. As she looked, however, she did notice that Ronnie's top canines had redeveloped. David. How long has it been since the boy's teeth were removed? About 2 weeks. Why? David asked as he swept dirt into a dustpan. Then, walking over beside his wife, she pointed out the teeth that were almost all the way back. Remember? We had that problem the first time that we had Malachi's teeth removed. Thinking for a moment, Karina thought back. Yeah. You're right. Well, I'm gonna go in and talk to Malachi about being nice to his brother and then take a look at his teeth also. Malachi had just gotten out of the tub when his mom barged right in. Mom. Malachi complained as he quickly wrapped a towel around himself. Malachi. You are not, and I mean do not, be mean to your brother when you guys are taking a bath. You got soap in his eyes and his mouth. Then, as she pointed? Do you understand me? Yes. I'm sorry. But But nothing, do not let it happen again. All right. Malachi looked down towards the floor to avoid seeing his mother's finger being pointed at him. One more thing. In a much softer tone of voice, Karina continued. Let me see the inside of your mouth. Looking up towards his mom, Malachi opened up as far as he could. As he did this, he momentarily forgot that he was holding his towel with his hand as it dropped to the floor. Oops. Then, as he bent down to grab his towel, to recover himself, his mom grabbed a hold of his arm. Mom. I'm trying to get my. Right now, Malachi, I just want you to hold still, Karina said in a firm voice. Now open your mouth again. Malachi, move your tongue, she said as Malachi seemed to be hiding his front top teeth with it. Then, as she put her index finger into his mouth, she could see that the canines had fully regrown. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. To Ronnie it must have felt like a lot of people as all three of his grandparents, his own parents, Nicole, James from across the street, and his own brother all gathered at Pizza Hut. You're 3 years old today, Ronnie. What did you wish for? His grandma Declue asked just after he blew out his candles. A bike, Ronnie said, and then began to laugh as James got pizza sauce all over his face. Malachi was enjoying himself as well but had quieted down as he thought about his friend, Lloyd, that wasn't there to join in on the fun as he normally would have in the past. Hey Malachi. David saw a look of distress in his son's face and decided that he needed to know why. Yeah, Dad, Malachi said as his dad bent his head down next to him. Are you all right, buddy? As David asked, he immediately saw Malachi's eyes water up. Come on with me for a minute, Malachi. Then, as David pulled his son's chair out from the table, so that he could get off of the chair, David led him, by the hand, to the restroom. As they walked in, Malachi began to openly cry. Picking his son up, David set Malachi on the bathroom counter and then hugged him lightly. Just relax, bud. It's gonna be okay. Then, after Malachi began to calm down, he continued. Hey. What's bothering you so much? I miss Lloyd. With this, Malachi, once again, began to cry. Now, with what little his son said, he held him tighter. I know you miss him. I wish that I could bring him back. Then, as he pulled himself away from his son, you know, Malachi, Lloyd really liked you. And I would be willing to bet that Lloyd, right now, is looking at you from heaven wishing that he could be playing with you right now. Something that you need to remember, Malachi, is what do you think that Lloyd would want you to be doing right now? Don't you think that he would want you to be happy? Yeah. With this, Malachi wiped a tear that ran down next to his nose. Well, I think so also, David said, and then pulled Malachi in close again. I love you, Malachi. I love you too, Daddy. Well, what do you say we go on back out to your brother's birthday party? Just remember that Lloyd would want you to be happy right now. You can do it for him. Right? Yeah. Then, as David picked him up off of the counter, they both walked back out to the party. The birthday party only lasted for about 3 hours before it was time for Dave, Karina, and the kids to leave. Ronnie was scheduled that day to have both a medical and dental appointment. The appointment was set for 2 o'clock that afternoon, and so the party had come to an end at 1. Well. Dr. Knox started. I can't believe that the canines regenerated that quickly. Did you say that they were back within 2 weeks? Yes. Also, a few years ago, we had Malachi's removed. 2 weeks later they were back. Now, with both of the boys, it's happened again. David responded. I remember that. Dr. Knox responded. If you would like, I could. No. There is not gonna be any research done. Karina interrupted. We went through this with Dr. Redding too. No research. Absolutely none. Raising his hands in the air, all right. All right, I won't do any research. I just thought that. Dr. Knox. We're not going to change our minds on this. Our decision is firm. Well. Would you like me to remove these new teeth? Standing up from his seat, Dr. Knox looked, once more, at Ronnie's upper canines. No. It seems that it's gonna be a waste of time and money. Not to mention that it's not exactly a painless procedure, David said as he tried to imagine having his own front teeth removed several times. I think that it would be best for us to just learn to live with them. Someday we may choose to have them removed again for pictures. After about 45 minutes with the dentist, it was soon time for the appointment with Dr. Redding. At this appointment, everything came out to be the same as past appointments with Malachi or Ronnie. Temperature was 73.1 and Ronnie's heart rate was 160. Overall, between Malachi or Ronnie, the average heart rate ranged anywhere between 140 to 180. The 140 was during times of rest while the 180 was during normal activity. Then, when the kids were extremely active, the pulse could spike as high as 250. As the beginning of the following year rolled around, for the most part, life within the Declue household was going as normal. Malachi seemed at times to have bad luck with his nightmares that would often wake the entire household in the middle of the night. Along with his nightmares, however, Ronnie had also awakened in the middle of the night to night terrors. As to this point, it was hard to dig information out of the mind of a 3-year-old to know exactly what the dreams actually consisted of. The fact that they were the same dreams, however, were based of a particular dream one night where Ronnie had made indication that there was an old man chasing him. Mom. I can't believe that Ronnie is going through the same shit that I have grown up with and that Malachi has been dealing with most of his life. When does this come to an end? Karina decided to stop and visit her mother the morning after Ronnie's latest nightmare. Dave had gone to work and so Karina took Malachi and Ronnie with her for the day. Karina. I've told you before, it's in our blood. There is nothing that any one of us can do about it and so you might as well just get used to it. Mrs. Sanchez was concerned about the fact the kids were dealing with things that most children don't have to. She had also decided, however, that she would remain honest with her daughter in regards to the different issues involved with their family history. Another thing, Mom. This ESP thing is kinda freaking Dave and I out. To make it worse is that I can't even tell him the truth. How long am I gonna be able to convince Dave that he's got an overactive imagination? Karina. I told you at the very beginning that you should have told Dave the whole truth. Honey, David is the father to those kids. He has the right to know. But you have chosen, on your own doing, to keep this away from David. What if the tables were changed? What if it was David keeping a secret about the kids, away from you? Do you feel that he would have the right to do that? Pausing for a moment, Mrs. Sanchez stared at her daughter, waiting for an answer. Getting up from the table, Karina went to the kitchen cabinet to get out a coffee cup. Then, as she poured herself a fresh cup, with her mother still staring at her, she finally answered. No. I wouldn't like David to keep any secrets from me. But you don't have a problem in the world keeping a secret from him. If you ask me, I'd say that that's not exactly fair. At the same time, Karina, I also understand why you're keeping a secret. You don't want David thinking that our family is crazy. You're afraid that he won't understand that a little myth could turn out to be reality. You know, Karina. He might not understand, but does that mean that he doesn't have the right to know? Sitting back down with her coffee, Karina searched her mind for a way to change the subject. She had it set, in her mind, that there was no way that she would tell David about the family history. She had made this decision long ago and had decided that she would stick it out with her plans to not tell him. Mom, are there any other traits with our family that I don't know yet? For the most part, Karina, I've told you everything with just a few exceptions. It is said that if our males consume enough blood from a person that blood will restore your health and extend your overall life. I've told you before that we can live for about 200 years. The only exception to that is if our males consume enough blood. Our males can literally live for 1,000 years. But how about Grandpa Arnofonso and Grandpa Miguel? Remember, Karina, they were both executed. If they hadn't been executed, there would have been many more innocent lives taken. Your Grandpa Miguel was 146 years old when he died. Do our women have any powers, Mom? Not much more than the automatic draw that our offspring are born with to protect the life and well-being of their mothers. Karina. No matter where you are in this world or the danger that may be present, your children will risk their lives to save yours. See, if you die, or when you die, then their future may come to an end. Vampires will become part of history and that Karina is something that we cannot allow to happen. But Mom. It's bad to kill innocent people. Yes it is. But that blood does not necessarily have to be human. Also, not all people in this world are so innocent. Those old newspaper articles show that innocent children had died. What about them? Your grandpa Miguel was an evil person, Karina. He killed many innocent people, and then, as he was about to be executed in 1921, he had cast out a spell that would remind everyone within his bloodline, for as long as our people exist, that he is in charge. Through this spell we often awaken late at night with images of him chasing us or trying to harm those that we love, sometimes those that we will love. How did he cast out a spell? I thought that witches only did spells, but then I guess that witches are a myth. No. Witches are just as real as vampires. In fact, there are many more witches than there are vampires. When a vampire dies, they get a dying wish. Most vampires choose to make this wish a positive change or wishing for further protection for their mothers. Your grandpa Miguel, on the other hand, had blamed his family for the charges of murder that he was executed for. Why did he blame our family? He blamed our family because your grandpa Arnofonso, Miguel's son, my dad, had turned Miguel in for all of the murders that he had committed. Well, I thought that Grandpa Arnofonso had murdered innocent people too, Karina said as she stood up to pour herself and her mother some more coffee. The truth is, Karina, is that Arnofonso didn't intentionally kill anyone. As a teenager he had gained the liking for the taste of blood and then had accidentally killed a friend of his. Miguel, on the other hand, like Arnofonso, had gained the liking of the taste of blood and then began to kill innocent people to pursue his thirst. Miguel, when Arnofonso was a child, killed some of Arnofonso's friends as they spent the night in his home. When Arnofonso was older he discovered what his dad had done throughout the years to his friends. With this discovery he turned his own father into local police. In retaliation, however, Miguel lied by telling the police that Arnofonso had killed some of his own friends and parents. To end the confusion in the killings, the police decided to execute both Miguel and Arnofonso. These police officers and their courts had also led the witch trials. So what was Grandpa Arnofonso's dying wish? Your Grandpa Arnofonso's dying wish was that for all people to forget what had happened, that had caused vampires a bad reputation, and for all people to believe that vampires are only a myth. How is it that we know about the truth when Arnofonso wished that we wouldn't know? It was your Grandpa Arnofonso that gave me those articles and explained to me what the truth was. As Mrs. Sanchez completed her sentence, she reached out and picked up her daughter's hands. Honey. It's up to you to decide what to do with this information. Also, it's completely up to you to decide if, and what, you tell David. Mom. If it was anything else in the world I would tell David immediately. For this stuff, however, I believe, within my heart, that I should follow through with Grandpa Arnofonso's wishes. To David it shall remain a myth. Just as there was a moment between the two women speaking, Malachi came stumbling out into the kitchen from the living room. Rubbing his eyes, it was obvious that he had fallen asleep. Hey Mom. When are we gonna go home? Looking at the clock on the coffee maker, Karina was shocked by how much time had gone by. Oh my. I guess that we better start heading that way right now, Karina said as she stood up. Well, Karina. Mrs. Sanchez spoke up. Would you put my cup and your coffee cup in the sink and then turn the coffee machine off? Once you guys leave I'm gonna head to bed for a nap. Yeah. I'll do that, Mom. Are you alright? Karina asked as her mother did suddenly look tired. Well, of course, I'm only 90 years old. I've got another 100 years ahead of me yet. Mrs. Sanchez joked as she stood up. Karina caught her mother's sense of humor, yet at the same time felt that the joke was a bit on the dry side as her mom said that she had another 100 years ahead of her. And just think, Mom. You only look like you're halfway to 90. That may be so, but you kids make me feel as though I'm twice my age. 180. Ha ha ha, Karina laughed at her mom as she picked Ronnie off of the floor where he still slept. Then, quieter, continued. Hey Ronnie, MG, time to get ready to go home, buddy. As Karina continued to get her youngest son up and moving, Malachi sat down on the edge of the couch to put his shoes on. Since the time that they had arrived at Mrs. Sanchez's apartment, both Malachi and Ronnie had fallen asleep with their coats on. As Ronnie began to stand on his own, barely keeping his balance, he had an imprint of his coat zipper across his cheek. It was only about 20 minutes after they got home that David had shown up. "Hi honey. How did work go today?" she asked just as David walked into the kitchen. "Ah. It was a slow day. I never knew just how hard that it would be to get people to pay their water bills on time. You would think that people around here would know that their water pipes will freeze if their water is turned off for too long." "Well, I hear you honey. Just be thankful that we don't have that problem," Karina joked. "That's the thing. The average water bill is less than $20 a month. How hard can it be to take care of that? Now, if your pipes freeze, you could end up paying out over a couple hundred, or even thousands, if they break." Suddenly pausing for a moment, David looked at his wife. "I'm sorry for putting this all on you. I love you, Karina." "Well, I love you too, sweetie." Then as she sat at the table, she continued, "The kids and I spent most of the day at my mom's apartment. The boys slept, which means that they might not sleep tonight. I guess Malachi's lucky that this is a Saturday night. That way he doesn't have to get up early for school in the morning." David was joking, however, with the tone of voice that he came in with, after work, had washed away most of any sense of humor. The following morning, being that there wasn't any school, David, Karina, and the kids all decided to go visit David's parents. As they pulled into the driveway on Exmoor Road, Malachi quickly got out of the car and ran up the steps and into the house. "Hey Grandma and Grandpa. We're here." "Malachi. It's nice to see you honey, but let's take off our boots at the door. You'll track snow in here that makes puddles on the floor," Patty said, and then looked back at the kitchen door to see Malachi re-entering the kitchen without boots on. "I'm sorry Grandma," Malachi said as he immediately scanned the kitchen countertop for anything that may consist of chocolate. "Well Malachi, where is your mom and dad?" Patty asked as she sat down at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. "We're here Mom," David shouted as they had just entered the house. "Malachi, you need to come back out here and straighten up your boots. You don't make a mess out of them at home, and so you are not gonna do it here either." "I'm coming Dad," Malachi said, and then raced back out to the living room. "Hi guys. How are you doing?" Patty asked as David and Karina came into the kitchen with Ronnie. "Oh, we're doing okay. Just happy that Karina and I both have the day off of work." "And I have the day off of school," Malachi interrupted. "Well yes you do Malachi," Patty said, and then stood up. Reaching up above the refrigerator, Patty picked up a large bowl and then sat it down on the table. "Here's what you're looking for Malachi." Malachi quickly sat down at the table, on his knees, in the chair. As he went to put his hand into the bowl, he quickly pulled his hand back. "Grandma. What are these?" he asked just as Ronnie walked up to the table putting his own hand into the bowl. "Malachi. Mom." Karina turned to face her mother-in-law. "Are these rum balls?" "Yes they are. I remember you telling me at one time or another that you liked them and hadn't had any in a long time," Patty said, and then left the kitchen. "Malachi, they are called rum balls. They taste good, go ahead and try them." Karina persisted as she took one out of the bowl, broke it in half, and then handed one of the halves to Ronnie. As Ronnie quickly forced it into his mouth, he then also very quickly spit it back out into his hand. "Mommy. That's yucky." Looking at his little brother, Malachi had almost dared himself to try one now that he could see that his brother obviously had no liking for the treat. In the end, however, curiosity made him put one into his mouth. "These are good," Malachi proclaimed as his grandmother walked back into the kitchen. "Well thank you Malachi. Just make sure that you don't turn yourself into an alcoholic." Seconds later Bill walked into the kitchen as well. "Hi Dad. How are you doing?" David asked as he too helped himself to the rum balls. "I hope that we don't eat all of these on ya Mom." "David, don't worry about it. We have a lot more stashed elsewhere. Eat all that you guys can. That boy is gonna get drunk," Patty had thought to herself as Malachi ate at least a dozen of the rum balls. Turning to face his grandmother, Malachi made a silly face as he held one rum ball in his hand and continued to chew on another. Then, as he finished the one in his mouth, "What does drunk mean?" he asked, and then continued to stare at Patty, waiting for an answer. Patty's jaw about hit the floor as her grandson questioned her. "Ah. Why would you ask a question, Malachi?" Instantly Malachi realized that he had goofed. Again. "I don't know. I've heard it before. I think that answer may have been good enough." Malachi finished his thought. Karina had witnessed the episode between her son and her mother-in-law. She had decided, to herself, that in order to prevent any question later on down the road, that she needed to talk to Malachi about his extrasensory perception. Her point in thinking that she should talk to him about it was for 3 reasons. 1, is the fact that she knows about it. 2, is to let him know that it's okay. The 3rd is to let him know that it's important that nobody finds out about it. Thinking as clear as she could. "Malachi, I want you to look at me." Just as she made this thought, her son turned to face his mom. "Malachi, don't talk for a minute. I know that you know what I'm thinking. Right now, Malachi, I want you to go out to the driveway to talk with me. Don't say anything to anyone right now, just go outside, I'll follow you out." Without anything else being said, Malachi walked out of the kitchen and then out the front door. "David, please stay in here with Ronnie. I've got to go outside and talk with our oldest." "All right. Is everything okay, honey?" David asked at the strange request. "Yeah. I'll be right back." Then Karina headed out the door after Malachi. "Malachi, let's go stand on the other side of the car. I don't want anyone to hear us." "Mom, am I in trouble?" Malachi asked as he followed his mother's instructions. "No, son, you're not in any trouble. We just need to talk about a few things." Karina put her hand on Malachi's shoulder as they reached the far edge of the drive. "Now look at me, bud." As Malachi looked up to make eye-to-eye contact with his mother, he reached out to hold her other hand. "What's going on, Mom?" "What you and I are about to talk about, Malachi, needs to stay strictly between us. Do you understand?" "Yes. I do understand. Buddy, you know as well as I do that you're able to read other people's minds." Malachi instantly opened his mouth to say something. "Malachi, just listen right now. You can talk when I'm done. Another thing, Malachi, it's important that you know that it's okay to be able to read minds of other people. The last thing, for right now anyway, is that you need to do a much better job at hiding the fact that you can read minds." "Mom, when I first realized that I was able to do this, it scared me. Now, over time, I sometimes forget to not answer a person's thoughts. I think that sometimes the reason that I accidentally answer a person's thoughts is because the way that we hear, or understand sound, is the same as reading, or understanding, someone's thoughts. If I'm not looking directly at someone's face, Mom, I don't know if what I'm hearing is an actual voice or their thoughts." "Well, here's an idea then. If you don't know if what you hear or understand is something that was actually said or not, just pretend that you didn't hear anything. Wait until you're actually facing a person, so that you know the difference between sound and thought, before you answer them." "I can do that. But Mom..." "Yeah. Why is it that I'm able to read, or understand, other people's thoughts?" "To tell you the truth, honey, it's a long story. As you grow older, I'll give you more information. For now, however, just make sure that nobody knows." Karina finished and then bent down and kissed Malachi on the forehead. After about 2 hours of visiting David, Karina, and the kids left to go home. Since the time that Karina had spoken to Malachi alone, outside of his grandparents' house, Malachi was in a sort of shock knowing that his mother had been aware of his ability to read minds. "Hey Malachi." David had decided that before they leave the Ridgeview area that it would probably be a good idea to ask his son if he would like to stay with Nicole or have Nicole stay the night with him. "Yeah, Dad? Would you like to spend the night with Nicole, or would you prefer to see if she can stay the night at our house?" "Let's see if she can stay at our house," Malachi said with a sudden level of excitement in his voice. With this, Dave took a sudden sharp left-hand turn off of Exmoor Road to head towards the apartments. "While we're picking up Nicole, David, the first I'm gonna run in real quick to check on Mom. She was acting a little weird the other day." As Malachi was in Nicole's apartment and Karina was in her mom's apartment, David and Ronnie sat alone together in the car. I wish that Ronnie had regular friends to hang out with. David thought to himself. Daddy. James is my friend. I could hang out with him, Ronnie said and then giggled. Oh my God. Ronnie's reading my mind now too. Daddy. What is reading my mind? Ignoring his son, David tried to clear his mind of any thoughts. Then suddenly the car door opened. Hey honey. What's wrong with you? You look like you just saw a ghost. Karina commented as she sat down. Karina, I think that Ronnie is into reading other people's minds just as much as Malachi is. Oh David, you're silly. Nobody can read minds, Karina said and then turned in her seat to face her 3-year-old. You better cut it out. Karina thought as clearly as she could to Ronnie. I'm sorry, Ronnie said and then looked down towards the floor of the car. I didn't ask for an apology Ronnie, David said then looked towards his wife. How is your mom doing Karina? She's doing all right. Just in there drinking a cup of coffee and watching The Price is Right. I don't think that she has missed a single episode since the day I was born. I noticed that she always watches it. I just didn't realize for how long though. Then, pointing towards Nicole's apartment door, as it opened, Dave saw that Nicole was right on Malachi's ankles with her backpack on. Well. Looks like that she will be spending the night with us tonight. Yeah. I think that we're gonna have to get back into the habit of making sure that those two spend more time together. She seems to help keep Malachi's mind off of Lloyd. She sure does. David responded. Honey, the last time that I took the kids to McDonald's. Malachi started to stare at the girl behind the counter. Then he made a comment on how cute she was. The girl heard what he said to me and then said then he was cute also. Then, as he looked at his wife he continued. Malachi immediately started to blush. You should have been there. It was funny watching him react to her statement. Karina thought about what David had said and then giggled at the image that her husband's words painted in her mind. Mom. What are you laughing about? Malachi asked as he opened the back seat door for himself and Nicole. Oh, not anything important honey. Just something that your dad just said. Karina lied and then buckled her seatbelt as they began to leave the apartment parking lot. After picking up Nicole from Ridgeview it only took about 10 minutes to get home. As opposed to usual, the roads were clear of ice and slush as the bright sun beaten on the pavement. I'm surprised that it's as warm today as it is. Could hardly tell that we're into the beginning of March, Karina said as they headed up the last block of Finley Lane prior to their house. Yeah. You're right. Isn't your old school teacher's birthday on the 12th of this month? David asked as they pulled into the driveway. Yep. She'll be 65 this year. That's only in just another 9 days. Then, just as she opened her door, we're gonna have to get her a birthday card. Mrs. DeClue. Nicole interrupted as she climbed out of the back seat. Yeah, Nicole? Whose birthday are you talking about? Then, just as Malachi and Ronnie got out of the car, Nicole slipped on a small patch of ice in the driveway. Oh honey, Karina said loudly as she bent over to assist Malachi's 12-year-old friend. Are you alright Nicole? Yeah. I just skinned my knee a little bit. Then as she looked at her right elbow, she realized that she was bleeding there as well. Come on into the house so that we can get you cleaned up, Karina said as her and David both led the way into the front door. After walking into the house, and then waiting for all 3 of the kids to walk in, David quickly took off his coat. Then, before heading up the stairs, he asked what everyone wanted for dinner. Captain Crunch. Ronnie spoke up first. Ronnie. That's for breakfast. Karina interrupted and then added a suggestion of her own. How about macaroni and cheese with hot dogs? Yeah. All 3 of the kids, including Ronnie, liked macaroni and cheese. Mommy. Yeah Malachi? Karina asked as she headed up the stairs after removing her coat and boots. Can we have some ice cream? Malachi asked as he quickly raced up the steps and then down the hall towards his bedroom. After dinner you guys can have some ice cream. And only if you stop running in the house Malachi. his mom said even louder. As Nicole got up to the top of the steps, she turned to head down to Malachi's bedroom. Hey Nicole. Stop in the bathroom to clean your elbows off. Okay. Alright Mrs. DeClue. Nicole stopped in the restroom, as instructed, and then lightly used a damp washcloth to wipe the sores clean. She was just about to open the medicine cabinet when Malachi walked into the bathroom. Hey Nicole. I've got the box of band-aids in my bedroom. Okay? Malachi had started to stare at Nicole's elbow as he waited for her response. Then, just a second later, the strong rich aroma of the blood hit his nose. All right Malachi. I was just about to search for them. Thank you. Then, following Malachi out of the restroom, she entered his room with him. See. Malachi held up a fistful of band-aids that had Scooby-Doo pictures on each one. Can I see your elbow before you put any band-aids on? Sure. If you really want to, I guess. Nicole had always been open and playful with Malachi. Then, as Malachi looked real close at her elbow, he began to sniff at the open cut. Malachi. You're acting weird. Why are you smelling my elbow? Pulling his nose away from her arm, he looked into her face. Hey Nicole. Just between us, and I know that this is going to sound real strange, would you let me lick your cut? Malachi. Just between us. You're very weird, but if you really want to lick my elbow, go ahead. Then, quickly, Malachi pulled Nicole close to the bedroom door, where he then put his own foot tight against it, holding it shut. You really don't want anyone to know, do you? Nope. Malachi then lowered his head towards her elbow and licked a few drips of blood that ran down from the cut. Pausing for a moment, he looked up to Nicole's face again. If you don't mind. And this is gonna sound even weirder. Can I suck on your sore? Malachi. You're crazy? Yes, you can. Nicole thought that what was happening was disgusting, yet at the same time felt that what he was doing kinda felt good. It had been a while since Malachi had the taste of fresh blood in his mouth. Even just the little bit of blood that he was getting from this minor abrasion had caused the entire front of his face to tingle in a way that seemed to cause his heart to beat faster and then caused him to breathe harder. Nicole just stood there and stared at Malachi's face. It looked as though he was changing, or at least something about him was changing, as he continued to nurse on her elbow. Malachi, Nicole whispered. Please move your teeth off of my skin. They're too sharp. Immediately she felt his teeth pull away from her skin. Thank you, Nicole whispered once again. This continued for about another 10 minutes before Nicole and Malachi heard Karina yelling, from the kitchen, that dinner was ready. All right, Malachi whispered as he removed his mouth off of Nicole. Let's get a couple of band-aids on this. Also, please remember to not tell anyone what we just did. Okay. Malachi. Do you honestly think that I really want anyone to know what we just did? Ah. I didn't really think about it that way, Malachi said, and then popped open the bedroom door. We're coming, Mom. After everyone ate dinner, David did pull out the ice cream from the freezer and then served surprisingly large servings to each of the kids. Let's try to finish this tub of ice cream off, guys. When you're done, come get more. This particular tub of ice cream had lasted for about 2 weeks in the freezer. This was about a week longer than average for one tub. We'll have to remember to not buy this kind again, David said as he looked at the name of the flavor. Pecan chocolate. I think that we're gonna stick to that caramel deluxe that we had before we tried this one. As the kids each got their bowls of ice cream, they headed out to the living room and then put a video into the VCR. Hey Nicole, did you bring any DVDs? Malachi asked. Yeah, of course I did. Nicole responded and then scooted herself closer to Malachi. You know, Malachi. Nicole was suddenly whispering again, between you and I think that you're the cutest guy that I know. As Nicole said this, Malachi looked up to her face and smiled. Thank you, Nicole. Then, as he turned his head back towards the television, he picked up her hand and held it in his own. As Nicole continued to look at Malachi, she scanned his entire body. His hand, that was holding hers, his chest as he was skinny, and then his teeth. Something about his canines, that were basically known as a birth defect, were, to her, a part of what made him attractive. Malachi had known what Nicole was thinking in regards to himself. Without letting her know, however, he just continued to hold her hand. Malachi had liked Nicole a lot and had felt, through her thoughts, that one day, either when they were older, or when she would allow herself to ask the question, that they would possibly grow old together. As they continued to sit on the couch, Malachi felt the warmth within her hand, almost wishing that she would ask him to be her boyfriend. If she would ask, he would proudly accept. About halfway through the movie, David came out into the living room with the tub of ice cream and the ice cream scoop. "Okay guys. We need to finish this stuff off before we can get another kind." As David said this, he had pretended to not notice that his oldest son and Nicole were holding hands together. In response, however, his rounds to each one of their bowls was much quicker than what he normally would have. As David walked back out to the kitchen with the empty ice cream tub, he motioned towards his wife to quietly come to him. Drying her hands, as she had been washing the dishes, she quietly came over and stood next to her husband as he pointed into the living room. Looking around the corner of the wall, feeling like a spy, Karina looked at her children and saw Malachi and Nicole holding hands. As she pulled her head back into the kitchen, she smiled as she was happy about Nicole and Malachi being as close as they are. Karina, even though her son was only 8 years old, had hoped that sometime in the future that Nicole and Malachi would choose the same road that she had taken with David. As David stood behind her, she pulled him in close behind herself by his arms. Then, as she whispered into David's ear, said, "I'm proud of them." It was just becoming nightfall when the movie had ended. Ronnie had fallen asleep on the floor as Nicole and Malachi had remained motionless, staring at the blank television screen. "All right guys. Time for you guys to go to bed," David announced as he turned off the television and VCR. At this, both Malachi and Nicole headed off to Malachi's room. "Good night guys," Karina said just as the kids closed the door behind themselves. "Good night Mom. Can we stay up and play quietly?" Malachi asked as Mee looked at some of his Power Ranger figures under his bed. "So long as you guys are quiet, go ahead," Karina answered and then headed out to the living room with her husband. "Hey Nicole," Malachi said as he, once again, looked at her elbow. During the time that they had been watching the video, his mind had been distracted. "Yeah Malachi?" Nicole, though she hadn't said anything since the moment on the couch, had hoped that Malachi would ask her to be his girlfriend. "Ah. I was wondering if it would be okay if I sucked on that cut some more? And, just so that you know, I really do like you very much." Nicole started blushing so much that she almost felt as though she was gonna faint. "Yeah, you can do that." Then, as she paused for a moment, continued. "Also Malachi. If you would like. So long as you don't hurt me, you can hold your teeth against my elbow too." "All right. Thank you Nicole." Then, as Nicole laid down on the bed, Malachi kneeled down beside the bed, then sealed his lips tightly around the wound, on her elbow, as she hung her arm off of the side of the mattress. After about 15 minutes of harvesting, Malachi could faintly hear Nicole beginning to snore. As he heard this, he quickly got up and then turned off the bedroom light. As he walked back to the side of the bed, as he could see by the streetlight outside the window, Malachi carefully lifted Nicole's arm up and then set it down next to her. Then, as he covered her up with a blanket, he softly whispered, "I love you Nicole." Moments later, Malachi rolled out his sleeping bag and then fell asleep on the floor. It was about 7 o'clock in the morning when the sun's rays, through the bedroom window, had awakened Nicole. As she sat up in bed, she looked down onto the floor and saw Malachi sleeping partially covered by his sleeping bag. Carefully, climbing off of the bed, she stood over Malachi as she bent over and covered his upper body, that had been exposed to the slight coldness of the room. Then she turned and walked out of the room. Malachi had slept fairly well. No nightmares anyway. Suddenly he had felt something touch his back and opened his eyes just on time to see Nicole's ankles heading towards the door. Closing his eyes, he just listened as he heard her walking down the hall and then into the kitchen. Seconds later, Malachi could hear the faucet, in the kitchen, turn on and then off again seconds later. Suddenly, as with the night before on the couch, Malachi could sense Nicole thinking about him. Setting her cup down on the counter, Nicole turned around to head back to the bedroom when she noticed the family pictures on the wall leading to the upstairs bedrooms. Looking over them, she found one of Malachi's most recent Christmas. In the picture, Malachi was holding a Power Ranger figurine that he had gotten for Christmas. As she continued to look at the picture, she couldn't help but to think about how handsome he is. I wish that he would ask me to be his girlfriend. I love him so much. As Malachi just continued to lay there, within his sleeping bag, he had already had it in his mind that the only way that he could be boyfriends to Nicole is if Nicole were to ask him. Then, as he continued to listen, he could hear her footsteps coming back to the bedroom. As Nicole opened the bedroom door, she looked and saw that Malachi was still asleep within the sleeping bag. Walking over to the edge of the bed, she just sat on the mattress and stared at Malachi. Slightly bending over towards Malachi, Nicole reached out with her hand and brushed his black hair back gently. As she did this, she could smell the shampoo that he had used the day before. Moments later, Nicole laid back down on the bed and then covered herself up. Then, placing her hand, that she had used to brush Malachi's hair back with, next to her nose, and then dozed off to sleep again. To say the least, Malachi had felt comfort by Nicole's affection as she rubbed the side of his head with her hand. Then, as she laid down, Malachi could hear the slight squeak of the box springs. Moments later, the soft quiet snore had started that had helped him fall asleep the night before.